To another episode of Swedenborgian Life. Glad we got that sorted out. Today we're going to be looking at, do our loved ones reunite with us in the afterlife? Our topics are going to be, will we see our family and friends? Will we see our spouses? And that we are spiritual beings. So will we reunite with those that we love in an afterlife? That question is a driving force behind so much of the human race's interest in spirituality and religion. What is death? Is it the end? Or is it a beginning of a new leg on the journey? It also forces the question, what are we? Are we destructible things that can just stop? Could someone that we knew, that we bonded with and grew with, that particular person with their idiosyncrasies and details, could they just be here yesterday and then suddenly today they're nowhere? They no longer exist. Now, it's no secret that there have been ubiquitous reports about people experiencing an afterlife, and Swedenborg among them. And today we're going to take a look at what he says not only about the survival of the spirit, but the survival of relationships. Will we still mean to each other what we meant to each other here? Stay tuned. And if anybody watching live saw me say anything twice, it's all part of the plan. We did not have any technical problems to start the show. Welcome back to Swedenborgian Life. Really glad to have you guys here. Excited for today's topic. My name is Curtis. I'm with the Swedenborg Foundation, which is a nonprofit which tries to get Swedenborg's ideas out into the mainstream. And my guests today are Donnette Alfelt and Sig Soneson. Donnette is the founder of Widows and Widowers, and Sig is the founder of Lost and Found. Thank you guys for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, and so we're going to get right to our topic today because it's a big one. It's on a lot of people's minds, and why wouldn't it be? So we're going to start it out by looking into... sorry, I almost got caught by this. If you guys want to be part of this discussion, write in your questions, your comments, all that. We want to hear from you because obviously this is a topic that impacts everyone. We want to include more than just us in the conversation. So get your questions in the second half of the show. We'll answer those. So let's move to our first discussion segment now. Okay, so I can't really think of a more basic question than that. Okay, if we do survive, consciousness does survive the death of the body, do we see the people that we loved again? It's got to be the fundamental. And so there's been a lot of people that have claimed, okay, I've had some kind of spiritual experience, I've seen the other side, and this is what it's like. Swedenborg is one of those, and let's hear what he said about that. This is from Heaven and Hell, number 494. After our life in the world, our friends and people we had known in the world recognize us. Spirits perceive who we are not only from our faces and voices, but also from the aura of our life when they come near. In the other life, whenever we think about someone, we call up that individual's face in our thought, along with many details about her or his life. And when we do this, the other is called to us. Things like this happen in the spiritual world because thoughts are shared there, and because space is not what it is in the natural world. This is why as soon as we arrive in the other life, we are all recognized by our friends and relatives and by people we have known in one way or another. Further, we talk with each other and continue to see each other in keeping with our friendship in the world. I have heard many people who have just come from the world overjoyed to see their friends again, and their friends overjoyed that they had arrived. And it's written a little academically, but that's a very powerful experience that he's describing there. And I wanted to have you both on the show because those two groups that we mentioned in the beginning, Lost and Found and Widow and Widowers, those are grief groups, but they sort of have a spiritual bent to them, and that kind of has to do with that first quote. So I just want to hear a little about the groups that you guys run to start it off. So Donnette, what is Widow and Widowers, and how is it different than perhaps a regular grief group?
Well, there are many very good widows and widowers groups, mostly at hospitals, but they're mostly addressed to the first year of grieving.
Right.
Our group is different because our group comes together. It is people who tenderly love their partners and feel that they will be reunited with them when they pass from this world also. Mm-hmm. So in our group, there are people who've lost their husband or wives a month ago or 10 years ago or 5 months ago. It's a broad spectrum, but our focus is always how can we work on our marriages in anticipation of being reunited.
Yeah. So that two things strike me about that. One is that, people often say the help the grieving people receive ends before the grieving does. That right when somebody dies, there's all kinds of outpouring of support, but a month or two in, it's like, okay, we did that, we're moving on, but you, having lost somebody, are still hurting from it. And that's interesting. So to be able to continue to work on your marriage, so this is the idea that you could still connect with the soul or the spirit of a person who's passed on. And let's get back to that more, especially in the second segment. So Sig, what is your group about?
Well, about 3 years ago, Donnette had been running her group for many, many years, and we sat down and said, well, what about all the other people that have lost,
Right.
children, brothers, sisters, friends? They need to have the same sort of support. So we started that, and we've experienced a loss, and now we've found a group that will support each other, and that's where the name came from. Yeah.
So what is the experience like of working with people who are grieving, and how does this the idea that we're temporarily bereaved but we're going to reunite, how does that change kind of the dynamic?
Well, I think you had mentioned how there's a grieving period, and people think that it's going to be over after a while. And I read a quote on a woman had a list of different things about grieving, and she said, the day I stop grieving for the loved one that has passed away is the day that I meet them again. And I thought that really hit the spot.
So even some people might think, okay, if you believe that there's an afterlife when you're going to see them again, you wouldn't be grieving then, if you really believe that. But that's not the case, is it?
That's not the case. Grieving is a very useful thing. Yes, some people are worried, particularly in our group, because we believe in an afterlife, and we think, well, maybe we shouldn't be grieving. He's fine, she's fine.
Yeah, why do I really believe it? Yeah.
But absolutely, grief is a process of adjusting to a very different life and a very different relationship. People die, but love doesn't die, and the connection's still there. But during grief, you are so longing for the physical presence, that it's hard to get in touch with a spiritual connection.
And often people will say, okay, well, they're in a better place somewhere, but I'd like them to be in this place. That's a hard substitute.
But I compare grieving to physical rehabilitation. You break an arm or something, or a leg, and you have to do certain things to get your strength back. And the same is true of grief. You are broken. You have lost part of you. And there's a process you need to go to regain your strength and carry on.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little more about you said this idea of reuniting with your spouse or your partner. So let's get into our second segment, and we'll look into that further. So I do get this question on the web fairly often. Okay, so even if I believe I'm going to survive the death of the body, will my relationship survive? If I was married to, if I love somebody, will I still love them there? Will they recognize me? So, Donnette, your whole group is based on the idea that this bond can continue. And I want to read a quote from Swedenborg about it. He also reported seeing that there. Those in true marriage love are not separated by the death of one, because the spirit of the deceased dwells continually with the spirit of the one not yet deceased, until the latter dies and they are reunited and love each other more tenderly than before, because in the spiritual world. Is that something that keeps people going?
Yes. And I think a key to that is that last phrase, love each other more tenderly than before, because in the spiritual world. Because in the spiritual world we're free of all the natural problems that surround us when we are married here. In some ways we can come more close to our partners as we can put aside things of this world.
And how does that happen? What do you find? What makes people feel like they're closer to their partners, or what are you recommending?
Well, part of it is peeling away the things that were of this world, maybe some bad habits that he had or she had, that they're no longer a part of them, and you can get closer and closer to the essence of this person you love and who they truly are without distractions of this world. Of course, we all want to hug them physically again very much, but as we come out of the grieving process, or it lessens, it seems to come more easily that we can feel closer.
Actually feel sort of a presence or a connection
Yeah,
of some
absolutely.
kind. Yep. Sig, how does this idea of continued relationships kind of affect you and what you do?
Well, I think it applies to any relationship.
Yeah.
And certainly, I know that a number of people in my group have, just assume that they will see their loved ones again, and that's just the fact. My daughter passed away some 21 years ago, and I am absolutely convinced that she will be the first person I see when I wake up in the other world.
Yeah, and thank you very much for sharing that, and just the power of that reunion, and that for so many people that there's these pieces of them that are somewhere else, and Swedenborg describes it in that first quote, like, oh, they were overjoyed, but that word doesn't really probably capture the actual emotion of that kind of reuniting. So I have one other quote, because there's a flip side to it. You say, oh, you're going to be reunited with your spouse, reunited with your family, and some people are like, that's great, and other people are like, oh no, So I just wanted to put this little quote in here to show that it often happens that married partners meet and welcome each other joyfully. They stay together as well, but for a longer or shorter time, depending on how happily they had lived together in the world. Ultimately, unless they have been united by real marriage love, which is a union of minds from heavenly love, they separate after having been together for a while. So I'm just trying to say, okay, so we don't want this to scare anyone, that if something isn't, he talks about a union of minds, and you were talking a little bit about that. If it's just an external kind of, okay, you're in a contract where you're married, but there's not a real communion of souls, that nobody's got to stay together because of something that's not working. I think that's important for people to know, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a saying that having a husband doesn't necessarily mean you're married any more than having a piano means you are a musician.
Oh, yeah.
That there's a superficial marriage and bad marriage, and there's good marriage, and there's dedicated marriage, and there's true love, and there's superficial love.
Yeah, and I just see the way that Swedenborg describes the afterlife is things make sense. I mean, nobody's like, it's not like these are the rules and they've got to all be, if there's not a real connection there, nobody's forced to do something. So Sig, did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the idea that all of the natural stuff and the inhibitions and the things that we hold up and the fears and the anxieties and all the stuff that keep us from being real spiritual, that's all taken away in the spiritual life. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's good to, whether you connect with the other person or not, it's going to make sense. And so you will logically either gravitate towards or gravitate away, and it'll all be good.
All be good. Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts of reading near-death experiences is you hear about life reviews, when people sort of see the events of their life and it all makes sense to them then. And I sort of get this, everybody who go, oh, okay, I get it. Like, even if there's somebody and you're not going to be partners with them anyway, it's not like, oh no, it's like, okay, I get it, we can be friends, it's all okay. I think you put it very well there. So let's roll on to our third topic, because we can keep the conversation going. All right, and the butterfly there is, as Swedenborg and many others have described this, it's a little worm that crawls on the ground, gets in this transformation, and then it's this wonderful thing that can fly. All the caterpillars are beautiful in their own way, and this is the process that we go through. And we were both talking about kind of in the spiritual world or spiritual life, superficial negative things being stripped away, inhibitions, and something more free and flying being there. So that I thought that was a good image for that. And I have just a quick quote to go with it. Since everything that is alive in the body, everything that acts and feels because of life, belongs to the spirit alone, and none of it belongs to the body, it follows that the spirit is the actual person. And so I just want to hear more reaction to it. What does that mean to you, Sig?
Well, what I thought of was in the group, we often, we're because we have an idea of the spirit and that we're going to reunite with the people that we love, there's a joy to that. And then the conflict is that we're feeling this grief. And and what I've realized is that we are spiritual and we understand, but we also are natural, and we have to go through the natural process of grieving and being sad. But underneath it all is that spirit that keeps us moving.
That's a great point, because I think people will have unrealistic expectations of themselves. Just think, okay, I should have a spiritual mindset about all of this. I read all these books that say this is going to happen, so I should be fine. But yeah, that's a great point. And the Swedenborg goes on and on about the natural and spiritual parts of us, and that we gotta live both, because we are both while we're here. So, Donnette, do you have any final thoughts on that?
Well, it made me think of in the first quote when it talked about when we wish to see somebody in the other world. It's not just seeing what they look like, but the aura around them. That in the next life, our outward appearances matches our spirit.
Right.
Not on this world. But in this world, it's true that we might meet a person and we'll notice their physical features, but as we get to know them better, they look different to us.
Yep.
And so some people have said they worry about, will they recognize their loved ones? Now, Sig's daughter died when she was 18, is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, she doesn't look the same, but he'll recognize her immediately.
Yeah. Yep.
Because of her aura and her spirit.
Yeah. That's a great point, and all the sort of stories of reunitings and near-death experiences that people tell, no one's ever like, who's that? It's a strange person. Yeah. You know the person, that there's something deeper there that we're connecting with. So that's a great note to wrap up the first part of our conversation on. Everybody, don't forget to ask your questions, leave comments. We want to hear your voice in this conversation. We're going to come back on the other side and take a look at what you have to say. All right, so now we go to the lightning round, as I've called it. When we get to, because this is as I said before, a really universal grief, a loss, a hope of reuniting, belief in the survival of the soul. These are huge themes that go through a lot of people's lives. We want to hear what other people have to say about it. So let's take a look. Our first comment is from Facebook, from Sally. I'm reading a book called Hello from Heaven, and it tells about after-death communications from all over the world. I don't like to read, but it is very interesting. I work for hospice. So, I have read Hello from Heaven. Have you guys read it?
I've read it, and I've met the author several times.
Yeah, what's his name is?
Bill Guggenheim.
Okay,
his
you
wife,
met him.
Judy. Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, I was at a Compassionate Friends, which is an organization that helps people who have lost their children. When my 8-year-old granddaughter died, her parents and I went to the Compassionate Friends, and Judy and Bill were the speakers. And they were talking about the book, Hello from Heaven. And they told their stories, and then they asked anybody in the audience if they'd had any communication with their... Oh, for those of you who don't know what the book is, it's people who have felt communication with somebody from the other world. And they asked if anybody in the audience of about 200 people had had any experiences, would they come up to the microphone? And a long, long line formed. But I just want to tell you a story about Bill. I met him at that first time, and then I heard him speaking 2 other times, and I talked to him a lot about our beliefs and what Swedenborg teaches before his talk. And when he got up to give his talk, he opened the talk with, people don't like to talk about death, he said. And then he looked at me and he said, except these Swedenborgians. It's true, we do talk about that a lot.
So you made a friend there. And I really like that he calls people who's had these kind of experiences, and a whole line of people. I find that the experiences are very widespread, and they don't have to be like a full-blown near-death experience, but just, somebody was at the foot of my bed when I woke up and they said goodbye or something like that. So, did you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, and a lot of times it's just an experience, a feeling that the person is there. You know, I'm driving down the road and you know, I just felt like I needed to move the car over, and it was like, you know, somebody was there, you know, helping me make that decision. That kind of thing often comes up.
Yeah, that's sort of the full spectrum, and that such a large percentage of the population has had something like that. So anyway, Sally, thank you very much for that comment. Let's take a look at our next one. This is from Maureen on Facebook. Can you suggest more ways to work on a relationship with someone who has already died? So, Donnette, do you want to give a first thought on this, since you had brought it up before?
Yes, many people ask me, how can you work on your marriage when he's in the other world? But I say, how do you work on your marriage when he's here?
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same. You try to be true to your marriage and honor your marriage and try to become a better person. I know that I'm a better wife. I know my husband will like me even better than he did before. He loved me, but I've improved. I've grown. And so being a better person, being what you want that person you love you to be, want you to be.
Yeah, and so sort of you know, spirit being the thoughts and feelings, the inner part of us, and the more that you're holding that person in thoughts and feelings and working on the spiritual qualities is it's totally.
That's one thought.
Yes, that's one thought. Did you have more? Can we get to two thoughts?
I agree that I think it's about, you know, developing. We're always working on ourselves, and that's not going to stop just because our spouse may have passed away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if you continue to look towards the Lord and try and improve yourself, that's naturally going to improve any relationship you have.
Definitely. Often, just removing the impediments to relationship with anyone, you know, is removing these negative sort of things in ourselves, and then the love just can flow right through. So excellent. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully that was helpful. Let's take a look at our next question. This is M. Christina on YouTube. What a wonderful way to help grieving people. Can you please tell me where your widow and widowers groups meet? Is there an online group available? All right. This one's for you.
We meet in Bernathen, Pennsylvania. I do have a, what do you call it, a website.
Yeah, it's a website.
I'm an old lady. I don't know about these things.
What's the website?
That you can visit, called Widowers, that's all one word, Widowers, Still United, or just put Widowers.
We'll put a link to it in the description of this video.
And I'm not active on it, but there's a lot of material on there that I put on a while ago that you can find. And also I have a book.
Yes. That
you can get through a link also.
Yeah, we'll have a link in the description of this video to that. And that's about the same thing?
It's a small version of it, yeah.
All right, very good.
Yes.
And Sig, is there any material for your group online?
Well, no, what I found really helpful is a group called grieftoolbox.org.
Okay.
Just have a lot of really good quotes, a lot of people that are hurting, that are figuring out how to deal with the grief, and it's just very supportive. I've steered people in that direction. Donnette's meeting is on the first Monday of the month, and Lost and Found is on the third Monday of the month, pretty much every month, unless we get bad snowstorms, in the Bernathen Cathedral.
Yeah.
And although it's mostly people who are followers of Swedenborg, it's not all.
Yeah.
No.
We have a number of people that come that are of other religions, but have this belief that they're still married and that they're looking forward to a reunion with their partners.
Seems like a pretty universal thing.
Yes.
You know, so anyway, hopefully that's helpful. And let's take a look at our next one. Walton, what if an infant dies? Does the baby grow up? How would I recognize someone who I haven't seen except as a baby? It's a great question. Thanks, Walton. I would say the way that Swedenborg describes it, and you know, you can get a lot of descriptions of how the afterlife goes, but the way he's talking about it, that he says we're not human because of our bodies, but because of our spirits, and that the spirit is actually just as complex and has just a definite shape and structure as the body does. So if an infant dies, he does describe young children growing up in the life after death, in heaven, and being taught, and they still have to grow and develop and learn things there, and they go through a childhood and an adolescence and an adulthood, but it just happens in a different way. And so there is that development there. And Sig, did you have any thoughts on that?
What comes to mind is the keeping the child in this life, even though they're not here. Many people I've talked to will recognize the birthday or the day that they died, or their second birth. And just keeping that as part of the family. In my family, we celebrate my daughter's birthday every year, and it just keeps her part of our spirit. It keeps us together, and I think that is a connection that will benefit when we get to the other world. Yeah.
So I had a sister that passed away, and her birthday was recently. I almost forgot it, but I forget my other siblings' birthdays too. So we're keeping it there. And I noticed he was also asking, how would I recognize somebody if they died young? How would I recognize them? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think that's any problem. I think our people worry about that also. If somebody old dies, and to grow old in heaven is to grow young. So how will we recognize them? But I think the Lord opens our spiritual eyes so that we can see the spirit of the person. And I don't think there'll be any problem at all. You'll know them immediately.
Yeah, and you think, here I can do a web search, like who is this person working at, you'd think they're going to have some kind of good technology that'll get the job done. All right, let's take a look at another one. This is from Michelle Ann on YouTube. What happens when you have had more than one spouse or stepmother and biological mother? Thanks. Great question, and it's one that quote that I read from Swedenborg, where he talks about people meeting up married partners meeting up in the afterlife and then either staying together or splitting. I think it's in a continuation of that. He talks about if you had multiple spouses, you kind of go through the process with each of them to learn, okay, what kind of connection did we have? Are we staying together or not? So, and I would think with family, it seems like it could just expand as much. If you have a big family, they can all be there. If you had, a mom and a stepmom or two stepmoms, if there's a bond there, the more the merrier in a way. So those are my first thoughts. Sig, did you have something?
Yeah, you think about that with somebody who is on a second marriage in this world. They're working on a marriage. They're working on a partnership, a connection with the person that they are physically with. And if it turned out that the first wife or the first husband was the one, they're gonna know that, and everybody's gonna be fine with it because there's not going to be any problem. Yeah, things are easier to clear up there. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts?
And I think most people who have had more than one marriage know in their heart which one it is, and they could love the second partner very much. We had someone in our widowers group. Her first husband died, but he was an alcoholic, and so they were separated. And then she married again. She loved both men, but when she came to our group, she said, it was my first husband, I think, is my eternal partner. His alcoholism came between us, but he doesn't have that problem in the next life, so I expect to be reunited with him. Yep, and so basically what makes sense, what makes sense is the world that Swedenborg describes, and that sometimes we feel like we know, sometimes we have no idea, but it's going to be all good. I want to come back to that refrain. Okay, thank you so much. Let's take a look at another. This is from Norma on Facebook. I haven't seen or felt my brother at all since he died. Why not? Well, I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's personal, and it's a really, really good question. And it's actually, we did a whole show on it because it's such a big question. So why, and you do get this, because there's, in that room you were talking about with Bill Guggenheim, the author, saying, everyone who's had a spiritual communication or something, stand up and get, so a lot of people did, but not everybody. And so, and this is a question, why do some people get visited by people that they love who have died, and why don't others? The sort of the conclusion we were coming to in the show when we talked about it was, it's complex, and it's not necessarily a statement about you. Like, so when we started this show, and the other show that we had some technical problems on too, but we tried to start this show today, and we had some technical stuff. We had a glitch, and because of these, the way that our computer here was working,
we almost couldn't communicate with the audience because this machine had to work just right. And the way that Swedenborg describes the afterlife, everything is according to order there. As he said, there are things that need to be there in order for communication to be open. So it could be that somebody wants to communicate but can't, or it could be because we think that's what we need, but we couldn't move on, or so. There's a million reasons. It doesn't mean they don't love you, is what we came to. That there can be reasons, and maybe we don't understand those till we move on. So those are my first thoughts. And Donnette, did you have some more?
Yeah, absolutely. I know in the Widow Widowers group, some people have had such visits and others haven't. And the question always is, why? And I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that we can be comforted by other people's experiences as well as our own. Mm-hmm. And that it may yet come.
Yeah, I mean, I have lost people, and I have never, I've had nice dreams. I haven't had what a lot of people would call like an overt spiritual experience, but I get a ton of comfort out of reading about other people's experiences and hearing about how it felt to them and having it be real to them. So so I'm one of those that you're describing there. So,
just reading Bill's book or Kenneth Ring's or Raymond Moody's can be comforting if we haven't had our own.
Mm-hmm. Sick.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing in groups where someone absolutely feels the presence of their father. In certain situations, they just know that he's there. I haven't had a lot of experience in feeling my daughter, but on occasion I might pray and say, "Oh, come on, Aaron, I think you could help out this situation a little bit."
Yeah,
and I don't get any response, but it can't hurt.
Yeah, yep, and it's just like it's like the mystery of everything in life. Why do some people have people close to them die while others don't? Why do some people have really seemingly good things happen? Why do other people have hard things happen? Some reason we don't know. It's this big thing we're going through life, and it may make sense one day, even if it doesn't now. So
I just want to say that although you may not have an experience of them, I think they have an experience of you. They don't know what you're doing every day, but I think there's a presence. Your presence is with them in the other world. Yep. So goes both ways. You're joined at the heart, and you always will be.
So, with all that together, I hope that answers some of it. And if you do want to just look earlier in our episodes, the show was entitled "Why Don't Our Loved Ones Who've Died Communicate with Us More?" or something very close to that. You can check it out. Okay, we have two more we're going to get to. Let's take a look. This is Rick on YouTube. Does the spiritual world pick up the connection coming from the natural world? Thinking of celebrating the deceased person's birthday. So yeah, that's a great. So if I was in the spiritual world and people were celebrating my birthday, would I wake up like, yeah, feels good today, man? It's a great question. I think of Swedenborg's quote, "Thought brings presence." And if you're saying we're joined at the heart, that there's got to be something where if there's love coming from us to them, there's got to be something there. And I think about the way that Swedenborg described the world after death, that we're always interacting with it. He said that angels and people, to him, angels just being people who had moved on, can influence our thoughts and feelings and that kind of thing. So I would imagine there can be something going the other way. Did you want to comment on it?
I absolutely agree. I think that there's a connection with many different spirits, and I think the ones that are closest to us are the ones that are going to be there supporting us and helping us and trying to help us move in the right direction.
Yeah. Donnette, did you have anything?
Well, I don't think they're aware of or conscious of the birthday cake you may have for them. Yeah. But they're certainly aware of your... I believe they're aware of your thoughts about them and your moods to some extent when you're feeling close or happy, or I think it affects them.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's take a look at one more here. This is Susan, Facebook. What do you think happens when loved ones are not in heaven? Would one who was realize this? Okay, so Swedenborg describes all kinds of states in afterlife. Like there's like world of spirits, which is like a transition period, and he does talk about heaven and hell, although his concepts of heaven and hell are quite different than what most people would think of as heaven and hell, the traditional kind of Christian. And so people can be anywhere along that spectrum. So I guess the question is, does our interaction with them change or something if they're somewhere other than heaven at the time? I would, for the stuff we've been talking about, like the connection, that kind of thing, I would imagine not. It wouldn't change that much. I mean, Swedenborg describes hell as being wrapped up in what could be translated as self-centeredness and materialism. That those kind of things taken. And I guess if you were in the other life and you were wrapped up in that kind of stuff, it could be you'd be maybe a little less sensitive to gentle things like love and thoughts. But maybe not. Maybe those people need it more than anyone, so that it does come through. I don't think I know. To quote this show, I don't know. But do either of you have thoughts, Sig?
Well, I think it's the same as meeting a spouse. I mean, if you go out into the other world and you meet your spouse, but it's not the right person, you would understand that, and there would be a separation. And the same would happen if you met your brother and it turned out that he was not a really good person.
Right.
You would have a connection, and then you would say, well, okay, it was nice, but we're different people, and you're in your place, and you're going to live in your society with your people that are like you, and I'm moving on, and it would be okay. Yeah,
and it's just some kind of change in relationships. Swedenborg will describe even people in a very heavenly state, being able to influence people in a more self-centered state, but just indifferent, like to moderate and like kind of help. And it might be that who knows, you could still have some kind of relationship, but it's different. You're there to like trying to steer them up, and they don't always know you're interacting with, but some kind of change. But but it wouldn't be like, oh no, they're gone. You'd understand what's happening is best for everyone, and they're where they can get the best help, and I'm where I am. So it's a great point. Donnette, did you have further thoughts?
No, I just want to nod my head.
Excellent. Good. All right, so that is it. Thank you guys so much for all those. Those are excellent questions and comments. I really appreciate hearing what you have to say. We're going to take a very quick break and then just come back to wrap it up with our correspondences meditation. Back. I was just trying to explain the hand signals that we get. Anyway, it's all complicated. So what we're going to do here is step back from the talking and do a little experiencing. This is a segment that's called Correspondences, and that the word comes from Swedenborg's idea that everything that we see there's the word right there. Everything we see has sort of a spiritual symbolism to it. We were talking about today about us and that we're bodies, but we have spirits, and that there's a spiritual dimension to everything. And correspondences is kind of the idea that in looking at things in the world around us, we can kind of understand things deeper in the spirit. And this could kind of apply to today's talk about the connection between the worlds. So we're going to look at light today. And Swedenborg said that light is all around. We've got lights in this room, obviously. And Swedenborg said light is a symbol for truth. And we kind of have that. In light, we talk about being enlightened, or I see, or something is illuminated for us. And so he says that if we're looking at light, we're actually seeing what light does in the physical world, the truth does in the spiritual world. And we're trying to have that happen. We're trying to spread this truth that, hey, we're going to see people again. And how does that change sort of the darkness of loss and that kind of thing? So as we look at these images, just sort of have that in mind, and this idea that you're looking at an image of light coming down is kind of like the image of the truth coming into our minds. And I mean, the way that he describes correspondence is, we're seeing light onto mountains there. And the mountains have their own correspondence having to do with like approaching God and love. And so you see light and love together. Anyway, it's part of, in his worldview, it's part of why landscapes, that kind of thing, is so powerful to look at. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to support it, feel free to make a small donation to the Swedenborg Foundation. Just open up the description of this video. Your donation will be matched 5-1, so we would really appreciate it. Thanks, and I really, really appreciate having you both as guests here. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, and we hope to have you back again soon. Everybody else, take it easy, stay safe in the blizzard, and we'll see you next week.